Tonight, Dispatches goes inside one of the world's most secretive regimes. It's a brutal military dictatorship, a land of spies and prisons, where dissent is ruthlessly punished. Foreign journalists are banned from Burma, yet for the past year, a team of Burmese cameramen has been filming secretly for Dispatches. They began their work after Cyclone Nargis hit Burma on May 2, 2008. The storm killed at least 150,000 people. 2 million were left without homes. The generals who rule Burma were hostile to the international relief efforts and indifferent to suffering. In a devastated landscape, tens of thousands of orphans were left alone, hungry, and traumatized. This is their story.
Kali wala taswala taking tiranomio. Taklim hekane pobe hiena esamke kali wala hine taklalo. Leka saso hira leki kali mu usula fala ula tabatul. Alla där ser likida och det tar du خبرت بالا سب مسبب دیتا کلیموه دیتا کهانی مسبب
Silver Moo is 13. She, her parents, her 2 sisters and her younger brother believed their church would protect them from the rising waters.
ولكن كلي سولا لكن هي تكلوا لكن تيسا دولا ما بوبا هني ما لو واكين بابا كوني تاكم بولا ودا دو بيتا بني بوكن يلا تودا بني بيتا ني بوكن يلا تودا يلا تري يقودنا يقوم دائما ده يسموه يمور يبورا أموريونا لكن كنا أمو بداونا يسمنا لا يمور يبورا يقوغا نتميونا.
In the weeks after the storm, our teams had started to infiltrate the Delta region on the coast of southern Burma. Cyclone Nargis and the tidal wave that followed had utterly destroyed hundreds of villages. Among the survivors, tens of thousands of children, orphans of the storm. This film is about their struggle to survive. To make it, our cameramen had to work undercover, evading detection by government spies. Discovery would have meant years in jail. Ten-year-old Ye Pint, 6-year-old Mei Nin, and 3-year-old Nei Lei are brothers and sisters. Unlike the children, their parents were indoors when the cyclone crashed into their village. "14-year-old Lang and 16-year-old Keen said that as the waters rose, neighbours panicked and clung to their mother. Despite the scale of the catastrophe, for weeks the Burmese government prevented international agencies from helping. It feared the presence of foreigners would weaken its power. Instead, Burma's state television proclaimed that everything was under control and that the 12 generals who rule Burma were leading a well-oiled relief effort. The Prime Minister reassured the nation. None of it was true. 3 days after the cyclone, desperate and hungry survivors were paraded in front of the Prime Minister for an official photo opportunity. The visit was also secretly filmed by an opposition cameraman. State television never broadcast the conversation. It showed how from the start, the government expected the survivors to largely fend for themselves. It would be weeks before the generals grudgingly allowed even small amounts of international aid. Deep in the delta, one of our teams established themselves in a makeshift village that survivors had built on the site of a town flattened by the storm. 1,200 people perished here. When our undercover cameraman first arrived asking to meet orphans, he was given a list 15 pages long. He chose to follow the little orphan family of 3. After their parents died, Ye Pint, Mei Nin, and their little brother Ne Lei were taken to a nearby monastery. Eventually they were brought back to what remained of their village. Our cameraman bought the children the first sweets they'd had since they lost their parents. The villagers were letting the children live in a tiny shack with just one room. They were struggling to find food and water. Other survivors in the village helped them when they could, but they too were hungry and thirsty. At only 10 and 6, Ye Pint and Mei Nin had become surrogate parents to their baby brother. Two months after the cyclone, in another part of the delta, one of our cameramen met a group of boys, many of them orphaned. They led him to where their village had been washed against a cliff. These were the remains of their family and their friends. One of the boys was 10-year-old Mo. Another orphan, 12-year-old Tun, took our cameraman to where the village had once stood. With their village gone, the boys now lived in temporary shelters. Buddhist monasteries are centers of opposition to the military government. Our teams found they'd also become places of sanctuary for orphans. 16-year-old Min fled to this monastery days after the cyclone hit his village. The monks gave him food, but he was also there for another reason.
going me so we target about so now. Anime so now. I saw now going so now. Come at the guy who come on the one going see one. I knew what I told. And so the guy going at the end with you as see me as we are within you see that.
It was now August, 4 months after the cyclone. A year before, Buddhist monks had led a revolt against the military government. As the anniversary approached, our cameramen were warned that the military had launched a security crackdown. Already monks were being arrested. Others had gone into hiding. What's more, government spies were searching for cameramen filming in the Delta. The warnings of a crackdown were soon confirmed by foreign broadcasters. Within weeks, 2 of our Burmese cameramen narrowly escaped arrest and had to flee. The other teams laid low, waiting for the moment when they could once again start to film. When Cyclone Nargis struck Burma in May 2008, many thousands of children were orphaned. In the 6 months after the disaster, Burmese cameramen working for dispatchers secretly filmed the orphans' struggle to survive. During September, the military government launched a security crackdown. To avoid arrest, our teams had to stop work. In November, when they felt it was safe to return to the Delta, they found a new problem unfolding. The rice harvest had failed across large parts of the region. In the village where the orphan family headed by Ye Pint lived, food was in short supply. For 6 months, the children had done for each other what their parents would have once done. But they'd now formed a friendship with 2 young women who'd also lost their parents to the storm. The women already had children, but they welcomed the orphan family into their lives. With food getting more scarce, the family now relied on catching crabs to make enough money to eat. As the eldest, Ye Pint helped prepare the traps. But even this source of income was now threatened. Even before the cyclone, a third of all Burmese children suffered from malnutrition. The United Nations says half the survivors of the cyclone are still in need of food aid. State television constantly shows the generals celebrating what they say is Burma's prosperity. This was the banquet for Army Day. This is indeed a wealthy country with huge natural resources, but little of that wealth reaches the ordinary people. Much of it sits in the bank accounts of the generals. The widespread crop failure had caused farmers searching for food to come to the village where the 3 orphans lived. The Burmese regime strictly controls all movement of people. Local government officials had told the farmers they were squatting illegally. They had been ordered to return to their ruined farms. Almost half the Delta's population is Karen, an ethnic group that is mainly Christian. One of our cameramen managed to film inside a church orphanage. The volunteers who ran it got no government help and could only feed these children thanks to money from overseas Christians. Most of these children had been orphaned by the cyclone. Among them was Lin Lin. When he first arrived, he was severely malnourished, having survived for days with little food. The head of the orphanage explained that Lin Lin was the youngest child they'd taken in. Another of the survivors brought to the orphanage was Cho Du. He had survived the storm because he became entangled in the branches of a tree. He'd come from a big family. When he was first brought to the orphanage days after the storm, Cho Du was deeply traumatized. All he wanted to do was return home. Overwhelmed with homesickness, some of the new arrivals had run away. Their safety was a huge concern for those who ran the orphanage. In the months after the cyclone, Save the Children warned there was evidence child traffickers were taking advantage of the chaos and kidnapping children. The head of the orphanage spoke to us anonymously because he feared government reprisals. Across the Delta, military-owned businesses make money for the generals. 14-year-old Lang and 16-year-old Keen lost their mother in the cyclone. Until then, they had gone to school. When our team found them, they were working in a military-owned salt flat, squeezing salt from the ground. They needed the money to survive. At the end of their 10-hour-long days, the girls walked 1.5 hours back to the hut they called home. The girls earned less than £1 a day from their job on the salt flats, but it was barely enough to eat. So 16-year-old Keen also caught prawns to make money to buy extra food for her and her sister. At home, Keen's 14-year-old sister, Lang, prepared the evening meal. The girls also scavenged for food they once would never have eaten. The sisters were forced into this life when their father suffered a mental collapse in the wake of the cyclone.
Tami era, tami me chime, peci era, che lo giù ma ora, tami me sale, anni mi viola. Apea, lo giù me sura, don't want più ba più so, tu mai lo sa ni ara. Cadare tami, ai da maru, li da bio. Tu de vai le sai de mai ai chao de. Ko nga de nga mai bi lo ni le mti u he. Mama mai chin nga le chin lo we. Nga ni mai tu lu le be so ai sai ko twi mi de. Đi đây mà nhau tụi vậy, xin em nhưng mà nhau tụi vậy.
Eight months after Cyclone Nargis, the futures of some of the orphans were starting to take shape. Silver Mu had been adopted by her uncle. With him and what was left of his family, she had made the dangerous journey across the border from Burma into Thailand. She now lived in a camp with 40,000 other refugees who'd fled the country. Silver Mu's uncle had been a government official working for the military. The way in which the regime abandoned the people of the Delta had turned him against his old masters.
So a good job of Tanda will be a good so Mapine, Baluma Mapine, Jamsi. Now let's see Doka, let's see whom I Doka only Ludoma to Makuya is the Chirodi Mapia Corridor, a Gonko, Mapine. The Climania to this country. So we take the major, a little not color, a European, the Pema meal, no?
Immolayan loga. Pate loga. Peso imutokani. Yesumura. Yesumura. Palumi da kinyore tiswe. Yesumura yitare yeswe. Motologa.
In March, state television reported on the annual Army Day celebration. In the 10 months since the cyclone, Burma's generals had tightened their grip on power, arresting anyone they suspected of dissent. 50% of the government's budget goes on military spending. Thousands of teenagers are forced into the army against their will. The generals keep power with an armed force 500,000 strong. After a perilous journey back to the Delta, one of our cameramen once again met up with 16-year-old Min. He was leaving the shelter of the Buddhist monastery. Min had decided to return to the village where he'd lived with his mother before she perished in the storm. When he reached his home, one of his old neighbors took Min to a shrine erected to the dead. Min set up home near where his old house had once stood. He had no job, and he'd borrowed money to buy rice and dried fish. As the months had passed, the government had gradually allowed some foreign aid to enter the delta. Little of it had reached this village. The villagers said most of the aid was siphoned off by corrupt government officials. Yet Min still preferred to live here alone, with the memories of his mother. Another of our cameramen managed to return to the Karen orphanage. The focus had switched from feeding the orphans to helping them cope with their loss. Volunteers were encouraging the children to recount their experiences. They were also trying to give them the love and security the cyclone had taken from their lives. When Chordu arrived 9 months ago, he had only the clothes he was wearing. Now, he proudly displayed his new possessions. Lin Lin, still the youngest boy in the orphanage, had also made new friends. The Karen volunteers were working hard to maintain the orphans' faith. The people here were worried that the orphanage may be shut down. The regime doesn't like the fact that it's funded by Christians from the outside world. In the 1990s, the Karen in this area rose up against the Burmese military. The army defeated them with extraordinary savagery. In the east of the country, armed Karen groups continued to fight against the regime. Towards the end of our filming, the Burmese military, which had done so little to help its people after the cyclone, launched a massive offensive to crush the Karen resistance once and for all. Burma's generals regard these orphans as potential enemies. Ten months after the cyclone, one of our teams risked a further journey through the delta. There was still little sign of the government's promised reconstruction. Our cameraman's goal was a final visit to the family of 3 orphans. When he met them, he found life had become increasingly tough. Salt water still poisoned the village wells, so the family had to rely on rainwater to drink. It was the height of the dry season, and the water was running out. Food was also getting low, and the children were down to the last of their rice. And there was another mouth to feed. A month before, one of the young women had given birth to a baby boy. Her husband was away looking for work. The only person working was 10-year-old Ye Pint. Each morning, he was delivering the dirty pond water for villagers to wash and cook with, just enough to earn money to buy food. In the 12 months since the storm, the 3 orphans had received a few packages of rice from the government and aid agencies. But to feed themselves, they were now getting further into debt. Ye Pint was worried about the effect the shortage of money and food was having on his little sister.
သမီးကသူများပတ်စံနေလိုက်ယူတယ်ဆိုဟုတ်လားသူများမဟုတ်တွေလိုက်ခိုးစားတယ်ဆိုဟုတ်လားညာတဲ့ဟုတ်လားဘာဖြစ်လို့
အားရှင်ပတ်တဲ့နူရောဝကျင်းတယ်ပတ်တမ်းမဘယ်နော်
A year after Cyclone Nargis, Burma's repressive government is still trying to keep the plight of its people from the rest of the world. Across the Delta, many thousands of desperate and traumatized orphans are battling to survive a life without parents, largely abandoned by a military regime that remains indifferent to their suffering.
Villa.
မေးကြည့်ပါဦးတာကိုယူချစ်လား
ကိုရချစ်တိတ်
ဘာလို့ချစ်တာလဲ
လူချစ်တာတိတ်လူချစ်တာလေလူဟမ်